Hello everybody, Mike Westfall here with McDonald Garden Center, your garden guru. McDonald Garden Center is located here in the Hampton Roads area of Virginia. If you are watching from other places, of course, always visit your local garden centers. When we're talking today about how to age terracotta, terracotta is a classic. It's timeless. It is one of my favorite containers to grow in. It's actually a great container to grow in, but it just adds a lot of character to your containers, whether you're growing indoors or outdoors. You can use them in a lot of different places, and it's just one of my favorite containers to grow in. And so I thought first I would just take a second just to kind of talk about terracotta planters in general. Terracotta, if you haven't ever used it before, is very porous, and that's kind of, I think, the most important thing to understand even as we go through these do-it-yourself kind of projects, to understand that it's porous. It absorbs water very easily, and so whether you're watering your soil and your plant inside, it's going to allow some water out. It also allows air and nutrients to flow through the soil, which is really, really nice for when you're growing in containers. So if you're growing plants, it's a great container to grow in. But I think what we're all here to kind of learn about is how to age them, and they age naturally very well, but they kind of get a patina on them. But it's a great container. You can use them, like I mentioned, indoors and outdoors, and it's relatively lightweight. And what I love about it is it's relatively inexpensive. So let's talk about the first way. There's 4 different ways to kind of age terracotta, and some of them I'm going to do demonstrations on 2 of the ways. Of course, I'm not going to be able to show you the natural aging process. I'll show you some examples. But natural aging occurs naturally, obviously. You can just buy, and this is where I recommend always purchasing some terracotta containers and leaving them in your yard, whether you're using them or not. I would think if you're a gardener and you love to be out in the yard, that eventually you'll use them at some point. But I always have some laying around, and I usually tuck them in a nice shady, moist location. So you can put them under some bigger shrubs, back in a wooded area if you've got it. On the north side of your house is usually very shady and kind of moist. Usually your shadier portions of your yard are going to stay moist a little bit longer because you don't have all that wind and evaporation and sunlight that's going to kind of wick that moisture out. So it's a great thing. Just tuck them up under, around the house. You can put them out underneath shrubs. If you get a little bit of dirt on them, it helps. So you see this image over here where they're stacked, and you'll see the ones that are on the outside have aged much better than the ones that are probably on the inside. Of course, we can't see them, but I wouldn't stack them. I would definitely lay them out individually. You can lay them on their sides sometimes if you want to. That allows kind of the moss and the algae to kind of grow on the inside, on the rim, but also maybe heavier on one side and lighter on another, which is kind of a cool look. But naturally aging is a very simple process. Now there's another form of naturally aging, which is basically grow in them and just naturally they will age. And I'll show you that here real quick, because I've got a couple examples here. Now these are from my house. This is a little mum experiment that I'm doing at home. But I had this terracotta pot. I probably used it for various different reasons over the years. And I had it sitting underneath a shrub. And I think last year I bought some mums, put them on my front porch, and I put them in this terracotta pot. And it looked fairly orange at that time. It probably was a little dirty, and I probably kept some of that grime on there. But then what I always like to do, and what I always talk about when we're talking about growing mums in containers, is I like to plant it. I like to go ahead and get it in some soil because I don't know, maybe I'll keep it. Some people throw away their mums, some people keep them. But I like to keep them because maybe I'll plant them in the yard at some point. But this one I was actually doing an experiment on. So it's a little bit, I don't think it's failed yet. We'll wait to see. But that's why my mum looks kind of scraggly. What I'm trying to do with my mum is do a late prune on it to see if I can get it to bloom around the Thanksgiving time frame, because usually mums are kind of almost fizzled out by then. Usually you've got your florist mums that you're bringing inside, but you've still got that opportunity to use those. But I was trying to see how far I could push it and still get some bloom. So I think I pruned this around probably mid-August, maybe late August. So really pretty late, and it barely grew out, and it does have some buds on it. But that's my mum project. So that's why that mum kind of looks a little scraggly. I didn't do a great job with it. But really what I love is this container. So I'm growing in it. It's got soil in it. I think probably the biggest fear that people have with terracotta is it cracking and breaking in the winter, and that is a possibility for sure. I think the most important thing to understand is because terracotta is porous, I'm going to say it a lot, it absorbs moisture, and so when it freezes, it can expand. Now it can take a certain amount of that, so I typically let them dry out a little bit in the winter, as much as I possibly can push it. But the most important thing is to not store it with soil on the inside in a planter or with a plant on bare soil, because bare soil, our ground temperature, of course, is going to release moisture and it's going to absorb more moisture throughout the season. So I always recommend, if you're putting it out in the garden or out in the landscape, to put it up on a couple bricks. That's going to allow it to not sit on that wet soil, which is going to prevent it from cracking. I keep these on my porch, so I have them up on my front porch, so it's a kind of a stoned area. Yes, it probably can freeze. It probably has frozen a few times, but because I make sure to kind of keep an eye on it, and when I was aging it early on, I kept it in a shady spot and it didn't have soil in it necessarily. So it was just aging naturally. It was kind of getting that grit and grime on there. And then as I put soil in it, planted this mum, and been growing the mum for over a year and a half now, that kind of green moss and algae look has started to come on it. So it's really, really pretty. I'll bring it a little bit closer so you can see it. And you can kind of see that watermark there. So I think that's really cool. And then of course, it's heavier on one side. Now, as you can see with my mum, it's growing this way a little bit more, and that's because this side is facing the sunnier side of my front porch. So the mum's kind of leaning that way. That's okay, and you can see the algae isn't growing quite as much. You know, a lot of survivalists will say, when you're looking out in the forest and you're trying to find north and south, that the north side of a tree is always going to have more lichen and algae and moss growing on it. So this would be the north side of this tree, and this would be the south side, because this is getting actually the most amount of sun. So kind of a cool little tip there, but that is that cool look on it. And I love the fact that it's uneven, it's natural, it's starting to work its way up to the lip. This is going to take the longest time because there's not a lot of soil. So the soil edge is going to be down here. So it's not going to get as moist in this area. You can kind of see it's starting to grow here on the edges, starting to get some of that patina is what we like to call it. But I really like the way this one's turning out. And so that one's great because it's got more of that mossy green look. This is a newer one, so I wanted to show this because I just started this one probably, I don't know, I've had the terracotta pot for probably 2 years, but I just planted this hellebore in there just because I didn't really have a space for it in the ground, and I love this one, and I really wanted to grow a hellebore in a container, and I just like the pot, and it's starting to age. And so what this is, this white color, is mineral deposits, a little bit of that fertilizer salt buildup. So as you feed plants, most soils have natural fertilizers in it. And then of course our tap water has minerals and different things in it, and that gets absorbed by the terracotta and starts to create this white look. And this has become very, very popular. I'm going to show you how to do this artificially real quick, but this is kind of how it happens naturally. So it doesn't happen perfectly. It's not perfectly all over. It's just growing and building basically. And then over time, you can start to get a little bit of green on it, as you can see over here. So I saw Barbara said, if you plant it in it, how do you keep it from freezing during the winter? So yeah, so keep it in a protected area. Try not to get it too wet. And if you're growing it out in open air, put it up on a brick or something that allows it to not sit directly on wet soil. Typically, that's what causes it, Barbara. All right, so this one's got a little bit of both. This is my moringa ivy that I've been growing for a little while. In fact, the deer have eaten it down a couple times, which is crazy, but it kicks right back. Love this ivy. Big, huge, bold leaf, lots of variegation. Love this ivy, and I think it's just kind of cool and simple in this pot. But anyways, so this has the mineral deposits on it as well. It's got the mineral and salt deposits all built up on it, but it's also starting to get some of that green. So this one is really cool. This is probably my favorite one. I mean, one, doesn't it tie in perfectly with the white leaf on the moringa ivy, but it's also got the green kind of algae mold look, which I really, really like. And none of this is going to hurt the plant. All of it is perfectly fine. I mean, typically, if you're growing in a plastic pot or even a ceramic pot and you're starting to see a lot of this white buildup, this kind of salt buildup, we're typically, especially if it's in your soil, then we're going to want to flush that, but that's easy. But terracotta, it's not going to hurt it. It's still breathable. It's still allowing air and water to go through it, so not a problem there, but it's just a great natural look. And that's how you naturally age them, is just let it naturally happen. So it's very simple. Now, the problem there is it can take a while, right? It can take almost 2 years till you're really starting to see some really good age. Some people will say it even takes up to maybe 5 years. So we can do this a different way. We can paint it. So painting is kind of subject to whatever it is that you want to make it, and you can do a lot of different things here. I'm going to demonstrate that here for you real quick. But basically you can whitewash it, which is basically taking an acrylic paint, or really kind of any kind of paint if you want to. But an acrylic paint works best for me, I've found. And then adding water to it. So you're making it very, very watered down, and you're going to get this kind of whitewash look. Some people might even use a hydrated lime. Now I'm going to show you a lime example here in the future. It's one of my favorite ways of doing it, but it's a little bit different look. So let me show you how to do the painting. It's really, really simple. All you need is maybe some white acrylic paint, a paintbrush, a little bowl, some water, and then we can get started. So it's super, super easy. So I'm going to demonstrate that now for you. It is a little bit of a messy project. So I'm going to lay out some paper towels just so I've got a nice little area that I don't get stuff all over the place, so I can clean up real quick. So we're just going to put down some paper towels, just a couple layers here, so that I can make a mess freely. And then I'm going to get my bowl. I usually use a bowl. You can use a plate too if you want. So I just get a little styrofoam bowl, a little plastic bowl, whatever you want to use. And then just some acrylic paint. So this is just some white acrylic paint. Stole it from my daughter this morning. But I'm going to put a little bit in now. What's the ratio? It's probably somewhere around maybe 1 part paint to 3 to 4 parts water. So you can always add more water. So don't worry about, if you make it too much, you can always add a little bit more paint or vice versa. It's pretty easy, but it doesn't take a lot either. So I'm going to just put a little bit of water in to start with. Got a little popsicle stick here I'm just going to mix this up with. So you can you probably can't see that it's all white on white on white, but basically it's just acrylic paint mixed with water. My acrylic paint is probably a little bit older, so it's actually kind of a little clumpy, which I found last night when I was kind of testing this out, which was kind of cool looking. So we'll kind of play with that, but I'm going to try and mix it up real good. And it depends on how thick you want this to be as well. You can do multiple coats, or you can do a single coat with thicker paint and wipe it off. But I'm going to show you kind of the technique here. It's very, very simple. And this whitewashed look, this kind of mineral deposit look, is really cool and really, really popular and very trendy, very modern. You can do this indoors or outdoors, really, really easy and simple. So let's see, I think I mixed that up. I think I'm going to add just a little bit more water, just because that'll make it a little bit easier to kind of whitewash it. And if it's a little clumpy, it doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, what I tell people with this project is it's better to be not perfect. It's better to kind of let it kind of happen naturally, because if you try and make it too perfect, it tends to look that way, and you really want it to look natural. So we're just going to kind of wipe that off. I'm going to grab my first terracotta pot. I'm using these little small 5-inch, 4.5-inch terracottas. These are $1.49, so they're very inexpensive. And some people will even start with just like a saucer and just kind of practice a little bit. But it's very, very simple to do. It's very inexpensive, and if you mess it up, it's actually pretty easy to fix too. So I'm gonna take these stickers off. What's cool about terracotta is you can sand it. And so I'm actually going to use a little bit of sandpaper here and there. But the reason I brought that up now is because a lot of times your stickers are going to leave that little gummy residue on the bottom, but you can just take a little sandpaper and just sand that right off. So it's nice and smooth now. So now I don't have that gummy residue. And that's great to know about terracotta in general, is if you get like a mark on it that you don't like, you can typically sand it off. So it's really, really easy. So I'm also gonna grab a pair of gloves just because it gets a little messy and I wanna kind of make sure that I can move on to the next project. So you don't have to use gloves, it's just paint, but you can if you like. And then I find the best way is obviously to hold a pot like this. Now, you are gonna want to do some of this on the rim on the inside, because as you know, when you fill up your container with soil, you're probably gonna have a little bit of a lip, so you're gonna still see that. So we definitely wanna still kind of apply it on the inside as well. So all I'm gonna do here is I'm actually gonna take a cloth. I've got a couple old rags here. I'm going to use probably this one because it's got a little bit of texture. It's a little bit of an old dish rag, dish towel, so it's got a little bit of texture on it, which I think might help. I'm going to get it a little wet just so it's already a little saturated. Just a little bit, don't need a ton. And then we're just going to dab it in our whitewash. So just a little dab, and then you'll just wipe it on. So I hope you can see that as I do it. Now terracotta, as I mentioned, is porous, so these projects are really easy because it happens very quickly. They dry very quickly. You'll really see it in my last example. But very simple just to apply this. And I'm not gonna make it super, super even. Like I get a couple areas that have a little bit more white. I'm okay with that. Because as you can see with my natural pot, it's not perfect. So it doesn't have to be perfect. So I'm just kind of wiping it on. Thicker in some spots, lighter in some spots. And it's gonna absorb the water very quickly. But because it's paint, it's not going to dry right away. So now all I'm doing is just kind of taking a little bit of the drier portion of my rag, and then I'm just going to kind of wipe away some of the excess, but also make it a little bit kind of smoother and look more natural than actual paint. So now I've just got to find my little painted section. Kind of lost it on my rag here. There we go. And because my acrylic paint's a little bit clumpier, I like that. I mean, it's got a couple sections that's going to be a little bit thicker, as I mentioned, and a couple that's going to be a little bit. So now, once you put it on and it's thick like that, just take a little bit of a dry rag or even a wet rag and just kind of rub it in. That just kind of dulls it down a little bit, makes it look a little bit more natural. So you can kind of see that there. And apply as many layers as you want. Like I mentioned, it's kind of to the eye of the beholder. You know, you really just kind of make it how you want it to look. You can blotch it on too. So I've done that before. So really just like that looks very cool to me. And very, very simple. Don't make it perfect. If you make it completely painted, it's gonna come off looking like it's painted. You wanna make sure that it looks natural, and by not thinking about it and not really, caring too much about how it comes out, makes it look a little bit more natural. And then as I mentioned, I'm going to put a little bit on the inside. I want to make sure I get some on the inside as well. Up on the rim. I usually like to go, so most terracotta pots have that little rim right there, that little lip. So I usually like to go right to that. I'm actually running out of my paint solution. I think it's because my towel absorbs so much of it. So you can do it with a paper towel, you can do it with a regular towel. So really kind of cool. So that right there is as simple as it is. Really simple way. I like this look. You can make it thicker, and we'll try another technique here too that is more of like the dabbing method, and we'll even try and add a little green. Now, I am no artist by any means, but that looks pretty good. It's that easy with paint. So a little bit of white acrylic paint and this kind of classic whitewash look, and it gives you that. And you can see the difference. Very, very cool, very, very easy, super, super simple. One of my favorite kind of projects to do, because if you buy a terracotta pot with that age on it, it's gonna be more expensive because it's gonna have to take the time to get there. So typically if you're buying like actually aged terracotta, it actually takes a little bit of time to get there. So let's or it might cost you a little bit more. So let's try another one with a little bit maybe more white paint this time, just because we're gonna try a couple of different methods here, and something that, again, like I said, just kind of, you play with it. It's super, super easy. Painting is very easy. If I really hated this, I could go and wash it off. I could go clean it off, or I can just let it naturally kind of age over the top of it. Can you use a brush and a dry brush it on? Yes, you can definitely do that. In fact, I can show you that next. I use a brush for my final method that I'll show you in here in a minute. I find the cloth to be probably the easiest. It seems to be a little bit more natural, whereas the brush tends to give you brush strokes. So I'll show you that here real quick. you can use a sponge, so a sponge brush or a regular kind of paint brush. You can definitely use that. So I'm gonna mix up my white. And then I did this before we got started. I mixed a little green, so I wanted kind of that mossy green. So I kind of had to play with my green because it was a darker green. So we add a little bit of yellow, a little bit of white to kind of soften it up a little bit, make it look on that mossy color. So I've got a little bit of that to the side. This is going to be kind of tricky because I've only done it a couple times and I'm not an expert and I'm not an artist by any means. But let's take our tags off. And sometimes you can actually even take and sand your pots down a little bit. I've seen people do that before. I don't typically do that because I like the smoother surface to start with. But I'm going to sand off that gummy stuff for sure. Because I don't want the gum to get in my way. All right, so let's see. We've got our white, we've got a little bit of green. Let's show you what it looks like with the paintbrush, just so you can see. It's gonna look a little bit too painted on. So you see that? It's a little bit, this is a little bit of a thicker solution. Now what you can do is if you paint it like this, you can come back through with a towel, whether it's wet or dry, and probably you're gonna want it a little bit more wet, so I'm gonna try and find my wet corner here again. And then you can just kind of wipe it down. So if you think you've put too much on, just take a wet, damp cloth and just kind of wipe it down. And that's actually a really cool look too. So that looks really, really nice. We could dab it on and we can see what it looks like dabbed on. But ultimately you're gonna find that it's always gonna look painted on when you use a brush. So you're probably always gonna be kind of wiping it off. So you're gonna get kind of that wiped off look anyways. So that's why I recommend the towel. Because more you want that than you want a thick pattern. Now you might want it like this. You might like this. So I mean, if you want it a little bit wider, maybe you're going for a different look, this is definitely a cool look. You can just do it like that. It looks a little bit more artificial. And we're going for a little bit more of a natural look. So in fact, since we started this way, let's go that way. Let's keep doing what we're doing. Let's paint it on. Let's get our white base. So let's get a base down, because I think every artist probably says that. Get your base coat down. Something to work off of. Fill in the bottom here. And then we're going to just take and just wipe that off a little bit. Give it that natural look. And it's okay if it's thicker or lighter in certain areas, it's perfectly fine. So there we go. Perfect. So look, I've got some thicker sections. I've definitely got some more terracotta sections. That really actually looks really good by itself compared to the other one. It's definitely a little bit darker. But now what we're going to try and attempt to do, in fact, let me do this real quick. Let me just get the inside lip of my pot too. Because that could be harder to do later, and I want to make sure I get that done while I've got this base coat working. So we'll get the base done. So get on the inside. Make sure you don't want to miss that, because we don't want all of a sudden that we're going to put soil in it and it's like, oh, I forgot to do the inside and now I've got to go get everything out again. But it's really, really simple. Just wipe it on, put it on, take it off. And you can keep on doing it till you get to the desired level that you want. It's that simple. All right, so now what we're going to do is do a little bit of more of like the dabbing method. So I think this one was a little too absorbent. It absorbed a lot of it. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try this rag. So I got this little rag here. It's obviously been used for painting before. And I'm going to kind of ball it up a little bit so I get a lot of like bumps and grooves and different things. And I'm just going to try and kind of ball it up so I get something more like that. And then we're just going to put it in the white again. I'm going to first go through with the white. And we're just going to dab it on a little bit. And then I'm going to come back through with the dry side. And this is going to give us a little bit more of that kind of thicker calcium deposit look. So again, I'm just kind of trying to take a little bit more of that kind of like streak out of it, so I'm not streaking across it. And we're just getting a little bit more of a dab look. So we're just creating that kind of natural, look at that. So you see how that's more on the natural kind of, looks like it's building, it's growing. We don't want it to look so wiped on. Now I love that look and it looks great, but sometimes it's good to kind of create a little bit more of that natural look. And I probably should have added a little bit of water to it and keep it natural. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to like kind of increase that kind of grow on look. And then I'm just going to dab it with the dry side. And then maybe, you know, a little bit heavier up around the edge here. And then I'm just kind of hitting it with the dry side, kind of trying to make sure that I don't get too clumpy and too kind of, you know, too painted on look. I don't want it to be too painted on. And this is where I say just play with it. You really can't mess it up too much. I mean, if it's a little bit thicker, it's a little bit thicker. So there you go. You can see I've got some thicker sections that look like they're kind of building. I've got some areas where it's not quite taken hold. Now we're going to attempt the trickier one, which is the green. So here I found using a paper towel works really, really well. Paper towel, similar to like a rag, is going to give you a lot of those little kind of bumps and turns and stuff. So here I'm using straight paint. I'm actually add just a little bit of water to my paper towel, just to get it a little bit moist, because I don't want it to be super, super globby and painty and super thick. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take this paint and I'm going to kind of work it out onto this plate, because I just don't want to get a ton. Just dab it off a little bit. And then what we're going to do here is we're just going to kind of start it. If you noticed on my pot over here, and that's what I always tell you is look at nature. So go out there and look at what, if you've got something naturally already occurring, go out there if you want to emulate it and kind of study it a little bit. So that's why I brought this in too, is because it kind of helps us kind of understand it. Now that's a little bit more solid. I'm going to try and make this a little bit more natural. So it looks like it's maybe growing. So as you can see right there. So just kind of a little bit down at the base, you know, a little bit darker at the base, and then kind of just like lighter at the top. And then again, just don't think about it too much. I mean, I've got this area where it's more terracotta, so maybe it's not growing over there as well. Maybe it's growing, you know, on the white a little bit more. And then maybe it stops there, comes up into this area where there is a little bit more terracotta. And we're just kind of going to work it haphazardly. Don't really think about it too much, as I mentioned. Maybe some up around the edge. And really, it didn't take much paint to kind of get that desired look. And then I'm just going to kind of come in with a little bit stronger of a kind of stroke and just kind of work some of it out so it doesn't look so painty. Because moss and algae don't grow kind of, you know, perfect, and, you know, have some darker areas, some lighter areas, and you want it to kind of meld like that. And even adding maybe like a little bit of brown would look kind of cool. You know, a little brown here and there would look nice. And I think I'm actually going to take this green and just dab it in a little bit of white. And then I'm just going to kind of come back through with a little bit more white just to kind of soften it a little bit. Just so it's really meshing. So again, we don't look super painted. And this is one of those things where you're just going to have to play with it. Try not to cover everything. You tend to find yourself saying, oh, there's a hole, there's a blank spot. Let me cover it. Don't worry about that. Hello, Deborah. Deborah asked, have you been displaying the garland and Christmas decorations yet? Of course. Next weekend is our open house. So open house is November 4th, 5th, and 6th. So you gotta come check us out for that. So I'm not trying to cover up the green, but trying to soften it a little bit. And again, try not to think about it too much. The painting method takes a little bit more time. I'm actually going to take that dry portion of this kind of dish towel and then just kind of give it a little rub down just to make sure I'm not super shiny and it kind of looks a little bit more natural and it all blends it all in. So there you go. Now I've got a little moss on it. So not too bad, turned out pretty good. It probably looks maybe a little bit better on camera, but it's a little bit artificial here. Like it's not quite as mossy as I probably would have wanted, so I probably should have played with my paint a little bit. But moss is hard. Now what I could do is probably actually take a little bit of dirt and rub it on here, but it actually turned out very cool and very natural. So you can kind of see the difference between a whitewash and kind of one with a little bit of growth on it already. And I could have put a little bit maybe on the inside if I wanted to, but that's how you paint terracotta. It's super, super easy. I think these look actually pretty cool. Did a couple last night, so let's see if I can find the one that we did that turned out really nice. So here's another one that sat overnight, so a little bit thicker. So you can see this is just the whitewash, a little bit lighter whitewash, and this might actually get a little bit more pronounced as it dries. That's a little bit thicker, and then this one's got a little bit of that algae on it, which is kind of cool. So very, very simple, very easy. You can do these on big pots. You can do them on the urns. You can do them on bowls. You can do it on any kind of size terracotta pot. I'm just doing it on these little small ones because it's a quick demonstration, but these are great. You can display these in your home. If you're putting like just little houseplants in them and you're just popping them up on like your windowsill or something, you probably don't need to do much to it. I will talk about how you can seal these at the end in case you want to do that. Because if you're going to display them outside, you might want to seal them with the paint. You probably won't have to worry about it too much. The paint shouldn't have a problem, but on my last method, you will. All right. Let me get all this stuff off to the side. I'm going to talk about two more methods on how you can do this if you want to try different methods. So let's see, this is actually still in pretty good shape. That actually wasn't too messy. I didn't make as big of a mess as I made the other day. All right, so now let's talk about the Yougurt method. So you maybe have heard of this method before. Yoghurt is going to attract lots of things to your container, and it's very simple. Just go get some regular yogurt and apply it with a paintbrush. It's pretty simple. Now here's the thing, it's not instant, so I couldn't show you. I could show you how to smear it on. You can do it just like I did the whitewash, but basically you're just going to paint on your yogurt. You can use like a little foam brush if you want to, the really inexpensive ones. You can use a rag, you can use anything. Just put yogurt on it. My best advice here is to keep it consistent, and of course yogurt is going to invite algae and mold and different things to grow on it, which is going to be really, really cool looking. It typically is going to end up a little bit more like that. So you see that kind of more that black kind of color on that far container over there. That is naturally what's going to happen when you do kind of a yogurt. So here's what you do. You take your terracotta pots. I usually turn them upside down, apply yogurt on the top and the bottom, or on the sides and the bottom. I flip it back over, apply a little bit around inside the rim, and then put it in a dark, shady spot. Now it's gonna take, I usually like to make sure that I've got maybe 2 days of no rain so that it can kind of dry a little bit, because you don't wanna go stick it out in full, downpour and all your yogurt washes off. But let it dry a little bit, but then leave it out in the elements and put it in a shady, dark place again. Nice and shady, kind of moist. It can get some sunlight, it just can't get it all day long. And those areas typically stay a little bit more moist. I love to do it in the fall. You can do it in the spring. Summer's a little bit trickier because we dry out a little bit more, but those are great times to kind of stick them out there, and then you'll naturally get this very kind of dirty, old, kind of like it was dug out of the ground look, and it's really, really cool. It's gonna be a little bit more flaky, as you can see that one, because it's actually growing on the yogurt, but once it gets through the yogurt, it'll attach to the container, and it works really, really well. Takes about a month. I usually say set it, forget it, kind of leave it, and then go back and check on it in a month, and you might be really, really pleasantly surprised. You might find that you need to leave it a little bit longer. It's kind of to the eye of the beholder. The longer you leave it, obviously the more that will grow on it. Now, once you plant in it, it's going to be completely safe to plant in. It's just yogurt. It's not going to hurt the plant at all. And then it actually will start to build even more over top of that, and it'll start to age and kind of do its natural thing. So the yogurt method is another one. It takes a little bit more time. I can't do it right in front of you because it takes about a month, but it's a great method, and you're going to get a little bit of that darker kind of, really kind of, I would say, almost like unearthed kind of look, which I think is very, very cool. So get some yogurt, apply the yogurt, stick it in the yard for a month, and put it in a nice, cool, moist area, dark, moist area, and in about a month, you'll have this kind of nice, kind of dark kind of algae growing on it, or maybe another different color. You never know. Lots and lots of different looks that can come from it, but it's a really, really cool look. All right, so then my final method is going to be using garden lime, and I really, really like this look. I think these turn out great. They're super, super simple, and it's kind of amazing how fast it can happen. So this will be a lot of fun to kind of show you this kind of look. All right, so let's get these out of the view here. So basically what you're gonna do is you're gonna pick up some Espoma garden lime, which I've got right here. I'm gonna show you how to do this. And then it's basically 1 part lime to 1 part water. And then you're just gonna make this kind of a muddy kind of mixture. And when you apply it, it dries like instantly, like in like 20, 30 seconds. And you'll start to see that age on it real quickly. So it's a lot of fun because it's so fast. And it kind of gives you more of like a French Parisian kind of terracotta look. It's very, very different. You'll see it sometimes, you know, like I mentioned earlier, they'll charge you a little bit more for this kind of look. Now this one is a little bit trickier because you are gonna have to seal it. I'll talk about that at the end, but let's show you how it's done. It's really, really cool because it kind of happens right in front of your eyes, which is why I like it. So let me grab another bowl here. All right, so I got just my little bowl, and then you're gonna wanna do equal parts. It doesn't have to be 1 cup, doesn't have to be 2 cups, you know, it just has to be equal parts. Espoma Organic Garden Lime, it's organic, it's completely safe, and the nice thing is you can use it in your landscape. If you wanna turn your hydrangeas from blue to pink, you got your garden lime. If your pH is a little low and you need to bring it up, you can use garden lime. So I'm gonna pour this into this little smaller bowl for measuring purposes, just so I get about equal parts. I didn't bring a measuring cup. So that's right about an even bowl of this. And then we're gonna fill it with water. Equal parts lime, equal parts water. Some people find it's a little bit easier to do a little less water because it's gonna make it a little bit more of a muddy mixture. But I always say it's harder to take water out than it is to add it. So I always put a little less in and then add it over time. I'm just gonna take a spoon here and stir this up. And I don't know if you can see it, but it looks basically like mud. As these garden lime granulars break down, it kind of becomes this muddy kind of mixture. You can kind of see it. It's kind of gloopy, but this is really cool. You're gonna love this. You can take it and just use the straight brown water. You can actually sort this out. Gives you a little bit of a different look. I like to try and get some of this glop on there. So this can actually take a little bit of time to really get a nice good mixture. I'm not gonna spend a ton of time stirring it, but you could probably stir this for a good like 2 to 3 minutes and just kind of keep on stirring it, and then it would get a nice kind of even consistency. And you'll probably find that you need to kind of keep on stirring it as you go along. It tends to settle a little bit, but that's pretty good, so we'll stop there. I'm gonna leave my spoon in there because I can always come back and stir it a little bit more. So I've got my mixture of garden lime and water. It's that simple. And then, of course, we need another terracotta pot. I'm just doing these again on all these small ones just because they're quick, easy examples. You can do this on any size container, any shape or size of terracotta. So we're gonna take our tags off. I'm gonna take a little sandpaper and get that gummy stuff off. We got that off. Then this is where we might use some sandpaper, but this is gonna be cool. So now I'm gonna use an old brush. You can use a new brush, it doesn't really matter. I have found that the older the brush, the more beat up it is. So I like to save these guys for these kinds of projects. But like this one obviously has a bunch of white paint stuck to it. Obviously I painted something blue, I don't know what it was. But this one is kind of beat up. I wouldn't use it to paint my walls, but I might use it to paint some lime on a pot. So I'm gonna get my gloves, another pair of gloves out. This one can be a little messy too, especially as you see me kind of work through it. You might see that you might wanna wear a pair of gloves with this one. You can wear garden gloves, it doesn't have to be these disposable gloves. But basically, we're just gonna take this mixture and I'm gonna give it another quick stir, and you'll feel it if you let it sit. That muddy mixture gets real thick down at the bottom. It's almost hard to get through. But that's the good stuff. That's what I want. So we're gonna make sure that we mix it up so that I can get down to it with my brush. Then I'm just gonna take this brush Now this is where it's really cool because this is going to happen very quickly. Terracotta, as I mentioned, absorbs moisture very fast. So as you apply this garden lime, it looks just kind of like a muddy mess, but watch this. It's literally just going to dry right in front of your eyes. Very cool. Just like that. And that right there is as easy as it is. Now I'm going to make sure I apply a good layer, make sure it's, this one I want maybe a little bit more consistent, or I'm going to show you with the sandpaper how you can make it a little bit less consistent. But I'm just applying this nice and generously. I want to get lots of globs and kind of different, thickness levels, and that's why you can apply it right over top of what you've already applied. Really don't have to think about this at all. I want to make sure I get it down in the nooks, down on that lip, that edge. And this one, maybe I'm looking for a little bit more of a consistency, especially at first, so you can kind of see it. But you can just see how quickly this thing is drying. I mean, it's really, really cool. And you're going to get these kind of cool globs on it. Now let's set it up and make sure we get the inside. Kind of put it in, get some of that gloppy stuff. And this one, actually, if it goes down into the inside of the pot, not a big deal, because it's just garden lime. It'll make your pH in your potting soil just a little bit higher, which is not going to hurt anything. So there you go. I mean, you could honestly almost leave it like that, and it is super, super cool. So now you can see the difference between a regular terracotta pot and then this garden lime Age Terracotta. Now, you can keep adding layers, you can keep doing different things. I do want this to just dry just a little bit because I put kind of a little bit more on the inside than I wanted to. But really, really cool look. I got this little drip on the outside here. You can see that, so I'm just going to paint that again. Get that smoothed out because you can keep it kind of this smooth texture, and then you can also sand it and do different things with it. So we'll show you that here in a second, give it a second to dry. I'll talk about the sealant real quick while that dries, and we'll come back to this. So if I go and just show you with any of these, you can go get, I think Rust-Oleum makes it, a clear coat sealant. And it's just in a spray can. It's super, super easy. I think you might want to make a couple coats of it to really make sure it's sealed completely. My biggest tip is use a matte finish because of course there's gloss or high gloss finishes. Those are going to add like a ceramic type of sheen to it. But if you add or if you get the matte finish, then it keeps it kind of natural and you can kind of see it as it's supposed to be seen. So now that this is kind of dry, basically I wore gloves because this can be a little messy. But basically what happens is you'll see it as I take it and just kind of rub it. It just kind of blends in. So you can see, and I don't mind these kind of, it almost looks like fingerprints, but I really don't mind that. So all I'm going to do is just kind of rub it all the way around and then just kind of see what kind of look we get out of it. It's basically just taking some of those chunks off, and you'll see it kind of falling. You'll see it on my hand. So it's just kind of working it in a little bit. If you hate it, you can always take a wet rag and you can wash it off pretty easily. Make sure I get the inside. So there you go. Really cool look. I mean, just super, super simple. Now, as you can see, it's kind of dusty. So I've left, all this stuff all over my hands. It is a little bit of a messy one. Maybe you do this outside, but it is just organic garden lime, so it's not going to hurt anything. And I think that is a really cool look. Now, what you can also do is you can take that sandpaper, and in some of those areas where maybe like right here, you can see really thick, a little bit thinner, really thick again. So it's kind of, maybe I want to lighten this up just a little bit. I want a little bit more of that orange to kind of come through. So I'm just going to take this sandpaper and sand it, just to kind of break it off a little bit. And then it's going to leave these lines. I don't know if you can see that, but it looks obviously sanded. So now just come through with your hand and just kind of smooth it out again. And there you go. Now you get a little bit of that unevenness. So if we go through and we kind of look for maybe some different points to maybe try that, we can kind of come through here Maybe I want a little bit more orange there on the lip. Maybe there, maybe it works its way down into here. So just kind of taking some of it off. And then just kind of rubbing it again. Now look, it's changed. You know, I've got a lot more of that terracotta kind of showing through. Really, really cool look. So super, super easy. A lot of fun because it happens right in front of your eyes. So you can do this with lots of different people. You know, you can do it with your kids. You know, you can do it with your parents. You can do it with a lot of different people because it's so easy to do. And I love this method because it just really has this cool texture and this really nice feel. It does kind of have that, obviously, that little bit of that powdery feel. I'd let this probably cure for maybe 2 or 3 days, and then I'd come through and seal it with that clear coat, that matte finish. But because it's so unique and different, you wouldn't have to do anything else. Now, I could go and apply a ton of coats to this and get it really kind of, you know, and then I'd come through and really sand some portions down so you get almost a texture to it. That takes multiple coats. But it's a really cool look. And so play with it because it's super, super easy. If I mess this up, I could go and take it and wash it out really easily. You know, I've got the lime on the inside, but it looks really, really cool. I'm gonna take this rag and just kind of work some of that. There we go. So even the inside looks cool. So these, just by itself, just like laying on a shelf or something, you know, just kind of in a pantry or, you know, in a display case or on your mantle or on a tablescape would look really, really cool. These look great. And you can use them inside, you can use them outside. They're great display pieces and they're great containers to grow in. If I want to keep this look because it's more of that powder coat, you definitely want to seal it. You can seal your painted one as well. So let's get them all back out and show them to you one more time. Move this off to the side. So definitely that one's a little bit of the messier one. The painting one wasn't as messy as I thought it was going to be. Maybe it's because I was doing it with my daughter the other night and I got a little messy, but it definitely is not as messy as the garden lime. The garden lime one does get a little bit dirtier. All right, so here's our garden lime. Here's another garden lime. So, oh, this is the one I did last night, so you can see. Sorry, I meant to show you that. So you can kind of see the difference there. Really similar. The one that we just did is maybe a little bit more irregular, and the one that I did last night is maybe a little bit more consistent. And if you touch it, so if you like kind of smear it, and you get kind of that fingerprint on it, you can just come back through and just kind of dust it off, and just kind of blend it back in. Now, if this has another day or so to cure, then I'm probably gonna seal this one. And that one's just a little bit more on the consistent kind of look, whereas this one's a little bit more on that age look. So you can see, just by exposing a little bit more of that terracotta, you get that really cool age look. So you can get that really nice kind of modern, like intentional look that it looks aged, but it looks aged professionally. Or you can get something that looks a little bit more natural, like you just kind of didn't think about it too much, which I like both looks. I mean, I don't think you can go wrong with either one of them. And then we've got our painted one. So here's our whitewash. This is one that I did the other night. A little bit not kind of as consistent. This one is a little bit of that lighter color. And here's one that we added a little bit of that moss to. So you can kind of see that mossy look. And if you look at it compared to this one back here, you can kind of see that green was just slightly off. We just missed the color just a little bit, but not bad. I mean, really not bad. Like sitting, I mean, probably on your screen, it probably looks pretty cool. I mean, it looks definitely like it's got some age to it. And we could go back and kind of tinker with it a little bit. I'd go for just a little bit more on that kind of olivey, mossy kind of green. But that one looks really cool as well. So 2 different methods that you can do instantly. Do it yourself, do it today, and you can be planting on them in a few days, especially if you do this method. Just give it a little bit of time to cure and make sure to put the, so Barbara said, can you get a moss look on the lime pot? Well, here's the cool thing, Barbara. Moss will most likely grow on these over time. It's not gonna hurt it. Now, if you clear coat it, it might get on there. It might not get on there as much because it's been coated, but no, I mean, there's no way to really get a green look out of this. This is a different kind of look. So if you really, Barbara, if you really want to get a little bit of that mossy look, you're going to have to try your hand at painting. So come and buy some inexpensive containers and just try it a couple times. I think, Barbara, you might have mentioned you were down in Florida. So just go to your local garden center and you can get nice little terracotta pots and just get a little bit of acrylic paint. You can probably buy a moss acrylic paint. I think they make it. This one happened to be holly leaf green, so very, very green, and I dulled it down and tried to make it as much of a mossy green as I could. But if you get a little bit of that, kind of mossy green color, it's really going to work really, really well. And just keep it inconsistent. That's my best advice, is don't overthink it. Is just kind of have fun with it and keep it haphazardly. You make it too consistent, it's going to be too consistent. If you want it to look consistent, you can. That is perfectly reasonable. I thought I did one last night that was a little bit more on the consistent side. This was another one that we did that was more of this. Oh, Barbara's here in Virginia Beach. Okay, well, come and see us and grab some terracotta pots and get some lime. Try this. So this is going to be your lime method. It's going to be more of that kind of dusty kind of, like I said, that kind of French market, Parisian market kind of look. But if you want to add that green mossy look, best to do the paint. Or, Barbara, the yogurt. If you got a month to spare, get some terracotta pots, throw some yogurt on it, and I think you'll like that look too, because it's going to look a little bit more on that mossy kind of, it's going to add a little bit of that black, it's going to get a little bit on that kind of moldy side, but that's perfectly fine. It's not going to hurt the plant. I know mold and plants don't sound like they go together, but different type of mold attaches itself to the yogurt. It's not going to hurt the plant, and it's going to look great. So a little bit of a different look. Try some different methods, but the painting method really looks great. And I mean, it's on there. It's not coming off. Now, if I tried water, let's just see what water will do to it. Just because now I'm curious, I set it. So if I take some water on my painted one, yep, it's painted. It's not coming off. So you don't even have to clear coat this. But I could go back through it and add a little bit more if I wanted to. But I think it's actually not bad. Just give that a little bit of that look, and it's really, really simple. And have fun with it, and it's inexpensive, and it's quick. I love the fact that this lime method happens right before your eyes. It's so much fun. Do a little bit of whitewashing, keep it light, keep it darker, add a little bit of moss to it. Really, really great method, and super, super easy to do. So a lot of fun for people of all ages, so anybody can do it. Let me get all my mess out of my way here. So great for kids, great for grandparents. Really, really simple method that you can do to age your terracotta instantly. You can do it naturally like these guys, or you can do it with yogurt, which is another great method. I'll show you that picture of that yogurt one again, so you can see it's a little bit of that darker green, but it's a really pretty look as well. And I think these four methods are the best. Now, there's a ton of them out there. There's a lot of different options, but these are the four easiest ones. The natural one, obviously taking the longest. You're talking about a year or two before you really start to get some age on it. And then, of course, you've got your do-it-yourself weekend warrior type of project. Super, super simple. The garden lime, the paint, and then, of course, the yogurt, which only takes about a month and could be very cool looking. So I definitely recommend trying some different ones, and I hope you all enjoyed this. Thanks for joining us for our How to Age Terracotta live webinar. We hope to see you in the garden center soon, and we hope you enjoyed this webinar, and we'll see you next time. I don't think I see any other questions, so have a great day. Thanks, Yolanda. Thanks, Barbara. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.